I'm Mark Trahant, and this is Wassaja. The indigenous world has always had media. My friend, the late Kiowa anthropologist Alfonso Ortiz, once told me that ancient Pueblo villages were lined up in perfect line of sight. This he was able to confirm with satellite images. These villages, 1,000 years ago, could use that line of sight to communicate with lights. Think about that for a minute. A light is on, it's off. On, off. Or in the language of code, 1, 0. This is the same framework as the internet. What was media differed from culture to culture. Many tribes chronicled their history with petroglyphs. North Atlantic coastal people recorded accounts on large belts embroidered with pictographs called wampum. To make the wampum, they collected whelk shells from which they fashioned purple and white beads. Then they strung the beads to create a band of images. Anthropologist Jack Weatherford once wrote, "The major task of the wampum writer was to represent an event or abstract concept visually. Because each image required hours or even days of work, the pictograph needed to be simple, yet easily understood and remembered by the reader." Simple, yet easily understood and remembered by the reader. This is a goal shared by writers in any culture, in any medium. Of course, ancient societies were not the only ones with media. The Cherokee Phoenix was the first newspaper, founded by Elias Boudinot in 1828. In that century, native journalists covered stories from the tragedy of removal to wire reports from the Battle of Greasy Grass, or what some call the Battle of Little Bighorn. That story was told in so many forms. The Indian Territory newspapers carried second-hand reports, and the Lakota told their own story on buffalo robes. In this century, as we have mentioned before, the newspaper Wassaja was publishing with the idea that it should let my people know. In the 1970s, the American Indian Press Association, a news service based in Washington, D.C. and Albuquerque, New Mexico, its reports were typewritten, photocopied, and mailed to tribal newspapers across the country. The press service produced remarkable journalism. The first news director, Richard LaCourse, Acoma, set high standards for the craft. Charles Trimble later wrote, "We wrestled with the concept of objectivity and truth when those ideals might come in conflict with what may seem to be an Indian interest or just cause. The issue came to a head during the AIM occupation of Wounded Knee in 1973. A few of the reporters in AIPA were said to have abused their press cards. AIPA was quick to issue a policy statement to its members. That document had the solid gold ring to it of Dick LaCourse's ethics and strong writing." Trimble, Ogallala Lakota, was principal founder of the American Indian Press Association in 1970 and its first executive director. Along the way, several national publications have come and gone. I published a magazine, Indian Youth. Then there was another magazine called Nations, which billed itself as a news weekly. I think there were 3 issues. Or my favorite, the beautiful magazine, Native Americas, that was published by Cornell in the 1990s and 2000s. Indian Country Today became a national publication after Tim Gallego rebranded his very successful Lakota Times and began hiring freelancers, opening a Washington bureau, and at one point, publishing editions across the country. Then, in 1998, Gallego sold his paper to the Oneida Nation of New York. That paper published for some 3 decades, creating an extraordinary channel for freelancers and coverage.
Did you have something you'd like to contribute to this?
It won't be kind.
we expect nothing less, Tim.
Well, I sold Indian Country Today to the Oneida, and they changed so much of the format, and I felt that, the paper, when I had it, I thought had a soul, a heart. And it just became a commercial enterprise. They took a lot of the humor out of it. We used to have columns with humor and everything. That was all gone. And I think they kind of took the Indian heart out of it. I think it still continued to be a good source of news even through all of this. And I've always praised them for trying to do what they did, and to keep it afloat for almost 36 years from the time it first started.
The events at Standing Rock were Indian Country Today's best moment, covering the event from the beginning with a thoroughness that the national media completely missed. A year ago, everything changed. The Oneida Nation said that Indian Country Today was going dark, and it was looking for a new operator. It just so happened that Native journalists were all together for a meeting, and we wondered what would come next. It was irresponsible to close the paper the way they did, period.
It's odd that they have invested so much money in building a brand and building a product, and now they're just like, ah, we're done.
What phoenix is going to rise out of these ashes, potentially?
I think nonprofit journalism is trying to find its way, and that might be an option here.
I think it's very, very important to have a geographical representation of journalists from all over the continent. If you know the country, if not the continent, because I'm throwing out ideas about tribes and tribal issues that somebody in the middle of the country that has no idea what's going on in my part of the country. I don't really know that much about what's going on in their part of the country because my beat is California, Nevada, the Southwest, Hawaii. That's where I report, and I'm deeply embedded in there. I would be uncomfortable trying to take on a story about the Northern Plains because I don't know and I don't have enough deep knowledge about it. So we need to have journalists who know their area, who can report on that area, and then maybe a few who have like the national perspective.
There's content that's happening daily. I represent one with Native America Calling, and if I had the power of the will to take in all of these reporters who just now became available, I would, but I don't.
I've heard of the term media blackout going on here, but I'm one of the people who didn't really get my news from Indian Country Today, honestly. I listen to national Native news. I get my news from Navajo Times. Honestly, I felt that Indian Country Today was essentially an aggregator in many respects. Not all, but a majority of their work. And I got a lot of my news from Indians.com, who do some fine aggregation work as well. So I think this idea of media blackout sort of undermines the work that a lot of people are doing here. We have the networks, we have the talent, we have folks to put this together. I'm hopeful to see what happens here at this point as well, because everybody here does fine work, and the work that we do survives regardless of one centralized place that it's going to be. I don't see a blackout. I see opportunity here.
A year ago, Indian Country Today was a memory. And that's when cool things started to happen. Native authors found new outlets. Native ideas about media started to surface. We began this show, Wassaja, and there was a lot of other media activity. Start by introducing yourself.
My name is Tristan Ahtone. I'm a member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, and I am the associate editor at High Country News' Tribal Affairs Desk.
The whole reason we wanted to have this conversation is because a year ago, the Native media landscape was questionable, Indian Country Today had gone away. Some were asking whether it needed to replace. And almost immediately, so many people stepped up and said, we don't care if it comes back or not, we're going to do things. And Indian Z and High Country News were probably the first to step up and say, we got an agenda too. Maybe talk about your thinking back a year ago. Forget now, go back.
Yeah, I think the closing of Indian Country Today, like it was a regrettable closing, but I do think it offered a lot of opportunities, and I think it also sort of exposed maybe weak points potentially in sort of the native journalism scene. Having like a centralized place like that shutting down and then putting a bunch of people out of work and not having that resource anymore, I think it clued all of us into thinking like, well, we need a lot of these, we need a lot of outlets like this. So I would say a year ago was sort of thinking like, okay, how can we sort of fix this situation? How can we democratize things a little bit more? How can we think about getting more Native people writing, reporting from their communities? How can we pick up the slack, basically?
Well, in fact, in so many ways, High Country News is ideal for that because you think about where it was founded and right next to Wind River and in a community that was had a lot of issues that affected the West. And for a paper that cares about the West, how did you make that sale and how did it kind of come about?
They actually sold me. They called, it was like last winter, and said that they wanted to start a tribal affairs desk. They said when it came to their coverage, they were leaving out like basically all of Indian country, and they wanted to do it better. I do get, I'm sure you get a lot of calls like this too. I get a lot of calls like this, but the difference is that they said we want to fund this, we want to make it an actual sort of pillar of our coverage, not just the one-off, not just throw us a couple of people. Like this needs to be a mainstay of the magazine. So that's how it was sold to me, and I find that kind of an exciting opportunity to say, okay, well, what can we do with this? Let's give it a try.
Well, you think about the West and covering the West, how could you not cover Native issues?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the sort of the joke in the newsroom a lot of times is like, how can we cover Indian country in the West? And it's sort of us on the other side going, well, we're just covering the West in Indian country. So, it's definitely that kind of like rethinking of it. But yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure who else has done this in the past. I know right now, HCN is the only non-native outlet that does this. I'm not sure where it's been done in the past before. I know AP had something going for a little while, but I'm hopeful that it's a model that other people will adopt. With their magazines, there's newspapers. I mean, all of the bureaus need to have Indian country reporters, people who can cover legislation, politics, people, etc. So I'm hoping it will serve as a little bit of a model for other places to adopt in the future.
You can also weave in some of the issues that High Country News is already good at. I mean, is there an exchange of ideas about some of those topics?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think their focus has always been sort of the people, politics, and places of the West. And I like that approach as well. They do very long-form feature writing, like deep dives into like complex areas. And I mean, for me, that's the kind of stuff that I like to do as well, so it was a really good match for that. But in terms of like looking at their, environmental coverage, science, et cetera, like it's a lot that we can obviously sort of like start melding together a lot more. So right now it's sort of a standalone desk on some level, but we're finding ways like all the time now to just start integrating everything so that it's not isolated.
This is probably way too esoteric, but I'll throw it out there anyway. I've always been intrigued with John Wesley Powell's idea for the West, where the whole region should be based on watersheds. And if you think about watersheds and tribal communities, thinking about the land differently, I'm just curious.
In terms of thinking about the land differently?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really have to sort of rethink, well, not rethink, I think it's just integrating how we're already thinking about land, how we're thinking about place, how we're thinking about history. So I think it's just bringing those into the newsroom and bringing them into the reporting. You know, the question, obviously, in the past, I'm not sure if it's as big now, but the question of like objectivity, can you cover your own community? I think that's beginning to change quite a bit, but obviously the big question has always been like, can you do it? And the answer is obviously yes. I mean, we're journalists, like information is our currency. I have no idea why anybody would want to put a barrier between you and that information by being like, well, maybe you can't do it. Like, so when it comes to like land use, water rights, et cetera, I mean, I think it's just really pulling in what we already know to be true, pulling in like case law that we know to exist, treaty law, just using our expertise to bring those stories to life in a different way, and hopefully help people rethink things a little.
Well, and you even think about just that very idea of you can't cover a community. Would you then take that to folks and say you can't cover Utah because you're a Utahn? Or, I mean,
exactly.
It's an absurd argument to begin with because everybody covers something that they're connected to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the biggest argument I would have if anybody's saying that nowadays is asking about like what do their politics teams look like. I mean, obviously with this administration, there's been a lot of emboldening of like white supremacist movements. On some level, like white males are going to benefit the most, so can they cover the president then? They stand to benefit the most. I mean, we can go down this path here, and it doesn't make sense on any level when it's applied evenly.
Again, thinking about that landscape and where we were a year ago, and so High Country News has extraordinary opportunities, and we haven't even talked about freelance. Maybe we should before I ask the question. Okay. But you're out telling people, come freelance for us.
Yeah, I mean, we want to pull in as many people as possible. We really, really want to be able to work with young, up-and-coming reporters. You know, our specific sort of style of feature writing is pretty rigorous and very in-depth. And we really want to work to bring folks in and just start really developing and helping, like, build that pipeline of talent. You know, I would like to see us as a place and have a reputation of saying, like, they help bring in new Native reporters that can work anywhere afterwards. So
again, back to the landscape. So there's this opportunity with High Country News. There's opportunities with this TV show that didn't exist a year ago. There's opportunities with expanded podcasts and radio. Now, Indian Country Today also is back. Is this beginning a golden age for Native journalists if you're a young person and the opportunities out there?
Definitely. I think you're absolutely right. A golden age of Native journalism is sort of here. I think a lot of that is definitely thanks to Standing Rock as well. But there is, even in the short time that I've been working, I've seen a very, very large increase in interest in covering Indian country and doing it differently. Both of those things are very exciting. So I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more opportunities, and I'm excited to see what's going to be happening here in the future. I think there's going to be a lot more magazines, podcasts, everything that are just popping up everywhere.
That's right. Indian Country Today is back. And this could be the beginning of a new golden age for Native journalism. So let's start by having you introduce yourselves, your tribe, what you do for journalism, and we'll go from there.
Hi, my name is Antonia Gonzales, and I'm the anchor and producer of National Native News, and I'm also a correspondent with New Mexico PBS, New Mexico in Focus, and I'm from the Navajo Nation.
I'm Rhonda LeValdo. I'm faculty at Haskell Indian Nations University. I also do a radio show in Kansas City called Native Spirit, and also a freelance slot. And I'm Acoma, Pueblo.
Let me just start by a year ago, we were all meeting in a room in Anaheim. There was great apprehensions about the state of media. And if you look across the board now, whether it's television with Wassaja, it's print with High Country News and Indian Z and Indian Country Today, certainly National Native News and Native America Calling, there just seems to be this resurgence Maybe, what do you think about that?
I think that as tribal media, working in tribal media for more than a decade now, that it's really important that we still have these stories on a daily basis. Our people, we know our issues, our culture, our communities, and when something happens, it's our tribal media that's usually first there on the ground. I remember when Standing Rock had just started, it was the local radio stations in South Dakota that were going down there and talking to people right away. So I think that it's great to see non-tribal media, mainstream media also interested, and I think that a lot of times picking up on these stories, and it's exciting to see that tribal stories are still interest for non-native groups as well.
You know, when we had that meeting, I felt like people were feeling upset because they're losing a place that they were contributing to, whether it was work or pictures or, you know, even stories, and it felt uneasy at the time. But as this year has gone on, it really feels, yes, there has been a resurgence of more media with Native American issues. And so I think it's great, you know, seeing more people having things published in different outlets, and even in mainstream outlets.
And I think to add to what Rhonda's saying is that you're also seeing collaborations. We've been collaborating with High Country News, the Solutions Journalism Network, and New Mexico PBS, and having these tribal and non-tribal groups, I think, and having that Native perspective, but working really as a team and not as this idea sharing or where are your contacts, but a real true collaboration. I think that's also helping with the tribal stories as well.
What comes out of that? How does viewers benefit from that?
I think for when I look at some of the work that we've done with New Mexico PBS, we did a health and wellness series, and we produced more than a dozen television and radio stories on health and wellness in California, New Mexico, and Arizona. I really think it broadens the perspective. I think some of the information here and there we don't need to expand on. Like, we already know as tribal media the high rates of diabetes and obesity, where in the non-tribal story we add a little bit more context, so we're not so that people can understand. And I think that what we've heard from some of the comments is that they're really glad to see these type of collaborations, because it's work that they haven't seen before on these stations.
Rhonda, you work with young people. What's the opportunity for somebody now?
I think it's tremendous. I mean, they can go out and start working with different organizations and contributing. And I always feel like I want to give them that opportunity to go and explore. I had a student who is in New York right now, and he's interning with a newspaper there. And so he's getting that really great experience from that. It's tremendous. And I think the possibilities are, you know, great.
I remember the 150th anniversary of Haskell Indian Leader, and I'm thinking back to how much the technology has changed since then. And now a Haskell student, in addition to working for a newspaper in New York, could start something tomorrow without thinking about it. I mean, the opportunity to create from scratch is one of the things that's really new.
Yeah, definitely. 120 years it actually was. But yeah, seeing it go from just being a print paper, so now they're doing broadcasts, they're doing their own films. We actually have two of my students who will be showing their short films at the City Film Festival in September. So, you know, they're getting different opportunities to go and have their work seen beyond Haskell.
Could we be entering a golden age of Native media?
I definitely think so, you know, and we're reaching out to different groups, of course, like collaborations. I was working with someone with NAHJ for an NPR piece that aired in Washington, and of all things, it was about dating and how Native Americans date and the complications that come from it. That wouldn't have happened if NAHJ hadn't reached out to me to try and, you know, get those contacts for her. So I'm glad that they went and did that.
Same question. Are we a golden age? Is this the beginning of a golden age?
I think so, and I think it's really exciting to see young people who are really interested in this, and I definitely give credit to Naja for helping me in my career. I wouldn't be where I am without getting thrown in the fire, essentially, coming to a Not Just Student project. That helped me get my first job in television news, is being able to build the confidence in myself that, I went to school, I learned everything in journalism school, but to really have mentors, that's really important. So it's really exciting to see and think about what our young people, the different opportunities that are out there for them today. And so, everybody has a smartphone, seems like, especially our young people, and they're already storytellers, they're already sharing. So I think we need to include the youth voices more, also in our reporting, and definitely in our newsrooms and management positions. We still, I'm a huge advocate for Native American broadcasting and tribal media, so yeah, it's exciting.
Well, you think about that cell phone, and this is not, that's supposed to be the last question, but you think about that cell phone, and never in the history of the world has there been something so ubiquitous that everybody has access to as a creator or as a recipient of media.
Definitely, and again, working with young people, the opportunities Naja gives to our young people to be able to meet people and find a job opportunity, I think Naja deserves a lot of credit in launching a lot of people's careers.
As this year began, I was hired as the editor of Indian Country Today. We developed a plan to be a nonprofit enterprise, and by June, we were publishing again. Our focus is now on the cell phone, posting news to readers where they are. Then perhaps this is just another extension of the ones and zeros from our history. I'm Mark Trahant, and this is Wassaja.
Memories, don't nobody tell you otherwise, till they see the world through your eyes.